Oh, Jesus Christ, I just remembered Sonic 3D Blast exists. Well, we have finally made it. Sonic has entered the third dimension, not counting you, and definitely not you. Now, the road to finally getting a 3D Sonic game was a long, rough ride. Not like the way IGN says it. Well, we had games like Sonic 3D Blast, which makes you assume, oh, this must be Sonic's grand entrance into 3D. It's not. The first real 3D Sonic game was actually set to appear on the successor to the Sega Genesis, being the Sega Saturn, which was being aptly titled Sonic X-Treme. No E, remember this is the mid-90s, everything looked like it was made on a cocaine binge. Sonic X-Treme's development in and of itself was a bumpy ride, as it was clearly being pushed out the door so it could compete with other games releasing around that time like Super Mario 64, which ended up leading to some terrible working conditions where employees were rushed and forced to work constant overtime, but nothing like this ever happened again. Never ever again. The whole thing is actually kind of a tragic story and shows how terrible the gaming industry can be, especially when under pressure, and it really does make you feel bad for the employees at the time. The game itself was of course set to be the first 3D entry in the Sonic series, bringing the high-speed platforming scene from the Sega Genesis games to, well, the third dimension. Kind of. Looking at the gameplay we have of this game, it looks more like a slower-paced game with some platforming elements mixed in. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, so the best thing I can do is say that it looks like if they turned one of those cube puzzle toys into a video game, and then like pissed on it. I'm sure this game could have had some cool ideas and fun gameplay, like there are some pretty good looking parts in the gameplay we have, and I would have loved to see what this game could have been if they were given enough development time, but I also kind of feel that even at conception this game was pretty flawed with how the level geometry is laid out and the weird fisheye lens used in the game. Why a fisheye lens? Oh yeah, this game was cancelled by the way if you didn't pick up on that. But are you slow? With the cancellation of this game, Sega brought Sonic 3D Blast, which was originally meant to be a final showcase of the Genesis' hardware, over to the Sega Saturn, and tried to make that their big holiday title to go up with like Mario 64. Yeah, nice try buddy, this game is not 3D, I'm gonna tear my eyes out. Sega attempted to give the Saturn a big 3D Sonic game so it could compete with the N64 and original PlayStation, but without a mainline 3D Sonic game to properly introduce the gameplay into a 3D space, it was pretty much over for the console. They released Sonic Jam, a collection of remakes of all the old classic Sonic games, which many believe to actually be one of the best ways to play the original Genesis games. I guess I should probably give this collection a try. Let's just search up Sonic Jam on eBay, and Jesus Christ! They had a side mode in this game where you could run around this big 3D space and see collectibles and whatever, but this is just kind of a glorified menu to see some extras. But then you had Sonic R, an on-foot racing game starring Sonic and friends, which is actually a really good idea for a racing game in the Sonic series. Like, why would Sonic need a car? He's the fastest thing alive on foot. Why would he need a car? This game was panned for its clunky controls and weirdly open track design, but I would be lying if I didn't say this game was a guilty pleasure for me. I also need to receive a lobotomy soon. The Sega Saturn was a huge failure in terms of sales without any mainline Sonic game, which is why for Sega's upcoming Dreamcast console, they made sure to have a mainline Sonic game ready for the launch of the console. So in November of 1998, Sega's brand new console, the Sega Dreamcast, was released, with Sonic Adventure as the main seller. The Dreamcast was also being released with games like House of the Dead 2 and, I don't know, NFL 2K, but what were you really buying a Dreamcast for? It was Sonic Adventure. Look at this game. Look at the energy this game radiates. It's like a sugar rush, or a cocaine binge. Since release, Sonic Adventure has always been dubbed as one of the greatest 3D Sonic games, excellently translating the Sonic gameplay into a new era, and it remained that way for many years, until a weird shift happened where suddenly this game sucks and it only began to receive nearly universal praise again the last few years. Thanks early 2010s YouTube. Now, my opinions on Sonic Adventure have shifted many times throughout the years. I never thought this game was bad, but I'd shifted between thinking this game was the shit, and then like a month later thinking this game had progression issues and had too many slow parts. I now have shifted completely after replaying this game like 10 times throughout my life and having this be one of, if not my favorite Sonic game ever, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Please. This game starts out with an opening cutscene showing off the new graphics the Dreamcast hardware was capable of, as well as introducing the game's main threat, Chaos. Chaos is a mutated Chao, which we'll talk about later, stuck inside the radiation of the Master Emerald, first seen in Sonic 3, and once released, Eggman feeds it with each Chaos Emerald he finds, and once all 7 Chaos Emeralds have been fed to Chaos, he turns into this big beast we see in the intro. After the sick-ass opening, we see the character selection screen where you can start the main campaigns of the game. Campaigns with an S, plural. Now from the start, the only campaign you're able to select is Sonic's, who of course has a most fleshed out and most in-depth campaign to go through. You unlock other campaigns of other characters as you meet them in the story. For example, you unlock Tails' story after rescuing him in the first level, Emerald Coast. I'll be taking a look at Sonic's story first, as he obviously has the most content as well as story relevance. However, afterwards I'll be taking a look at the other campaigns. Obviously just not as in-depth, because what the fuck am I supposed to say about Amy? Sonic's campaign starts out with a boss fight against the previously mentioned Chaos. This boss fight does a good job at introducing you to the new perspective not seen like this before, as well as Sonic's new move, the homing attack. Since Sonic moves so fast, it can be difficult to easily target enemies in a 3D space because it's just not as simple as it was before, so the homing attack allows you to lock onto an enemy by pressing the jump button twice and it automatically jumps towards them. This move does get some flack on occasion for making the game too automated during many of the parts, which can be true, but I don't know man, it just feels so good to pull off. I really like this move. Overall, Sonic's control surprisingly feels great in this game. Which is weird since you so often hear about how the physics in a Sonic game are messed up, for example like Sonic 4, Sonic Heroes, maybe Sonic 06, but I think that game has other problems to worry about. But this game was actually able to pull it off great. He feels just as floaty as he did before, just as fast, whatever else. Before, to pull off a spin dash, you needed to hold down the D-pad and press the jump button, but here they changed it so the move can be done with the press of a single button, allowing you to quickly propel yourself at a dime's notice. It's almost like a direct replication of the movement from the Genesis games. Outside of the levels themselves, you're sent to roam free around these hub world-like areas called adventure fields where you need to find and do specific things to progress to future levels. The first adventure field you enter is Station Square, which is this game's most iconic location. I remember it from Sonic X and the Leapster. Where's your sympathy? I played this game when I was a kid. It's a pretty small and dense city, and after running around it a few times, you've essentially seen everything, but the vibes this area gives off is crazy. Not very realistic though. I live in a big city. Where are the people pissing on cars? True story, by the way. It honestly feels like a place that's genuinely lived in the context of the game, with many NPCs reacting to the events of the game. You know, like there are other people living in Sonic's world. We lose that pretty soon in future games, so appreciate what we have here. You also have the Mystic Ruins, which is this large jungle area with a big cave and mountain you can explore, which does not give off the same vibes as Station Square, but it gives off its own mysterious energy. And then also from here, later on in the game, you can go to Angel Island, you know, that place where Knuckles lives and protects the Master Emerald. I think this is one of my favorite areas in the game, being able to freely roam around Angel Island without it being a whole level like in Sonic 3. Like now I know the feel of this place that this dude lives in. Damn, I would get so bored, no wonder the rest of your population is dead, I wouldn't want to live here either. The last adventure field is the Egg Carrier scene at the end of the game, which is by far the smallest. This place is basically just a hub to get to the final level, but there are some really cool secrets to find around here, like seeing Metal and Mecha Sonic from Sonic 2 and CD just randomly sitting here. Hi guys! My favorite thing you can find here is this whack-a-mole game called Hedgehog Hammer, where as the name says, you whack little Sonics to death. I don't know why, I just find this really perfect for Eggman's character. Even the gameplay and level design itself feels very similar to how it feels in the original Genesis games, starting with Emerald Coast. It takes the same design properties used in those games, such as the top route being the fastest, bottom route being the slowest, etc, but this one brings it into 3D. Which is why I always love hearing the quote on how Sonic had a rough transition to 3D, because this is the first proper 3D Sonic game in the Sonic series, and I don't know man, it feels pretty smooth to me. The only level here that feels out of place is Casinopolis, because unlike literally every other level in the game, this level takes a very different approach to its gameplay, and while sucks is a strong word, it's different, that's for sure. It's labeled as a speed stage like every other level, but instead of running around an actual level like those, you need to go around in these slot machines and play pinball and collect rings, and you need to collect enough rings to fully fill up this big room to reach the Chaos Emerald on top. Now this in itself is a fun idea, and even the pinball machines are themed after Sonic, and my favorite being Nights into Dreams, a really cool reference to another Sega property. But the problem is that the game encourages you to do poor here, as the game sends you down to the sewers if you run out of balls here, which you would think is a punishment, but no. There are actually hundreds of rings down here. It is literally better to collect currency in this casino to go into the sewers than to actually gamble. Maybe I should take some notes. This level just kind of bothers me because the casino/pinball levels are some of my favorites in Sonic games, and in Sonic Adventure they nail the aesthetic, but they didn't make it an actual level. But the levels here are great, and I mean great. My favorites include Red Mountain, Windy Valley, and Ice Cap, but I don't think there's really a bad level here outside of Casinopolis, which is more or less fine. And each level introduces something new to shake up the gameplay and differentiate it from the rest. For example, Twinkle Park has this racing portion near the end of the level, and Ice Cap Zone ends with this whole snowboarding segment, which feels like a more realized take on the snowboard segment from the beginning of the level of Sonic 3. I always forget that Ice Cap is for some reason the only level that isn't original to this game. They just made the level return from Sonic 3. It makes sense though, considering that the level is located under Angel Island like it is in Sonic 3. Just kinda weird. You also have a level like Lost World here, which is in my opinion probably the worst, but not bad in any way whatsoever, just I wouldn't really go out of my way to touch it again. It's like a one-night stand or something. I know a lot about sex, guys. This level's main set piece is this big water snake thing that you need to ride and press buttons for the water to raise so you can get to the top doors, which just ends up being slow and kind of unforgiving. I've heard people say that if you don't like this part, then it's just a skill issue, you need to get a better attention span, but you're wrong, this part just sucks.
And I have a really good attention span.
And the rest of this level is fine, however, it's really just that one part that brings it down for me. Maybe I do have a shit attention span. But for every part in this game that's somewhat lackluster, there are about 5 things that make you say, hell yeah. Like, why would I need sex and companionship when I have this? Again, I know what those feel like, guys. I would know. The only other negatives I have for this game are the boss fights, because a lot of them just rely on hitting them with the homing attack at the right time and rarely go much further past that. Like, watch this boss fight you do nearly right after the first level. I learned how to do the homing attack in the boss right before this. I get it! And then there's also these 2 sky chase stages where Tails flies you on the tornado to get to Eggman's ship, but these end up taking forever and you can't get any faster because the plane has a set speed, so a lot of it is just waiting. Tails, you're taking fucking forever. I hope you get shot down to make this more interesting. I didn't mean it. Overall, Sonic's campaign in this game is what I would say a near perfect translation from the previous Sonic games seen on the Genesis and being brought to a whole new dimension and taking minimal compromises to get that way. But then there are also like 5 other campaigns in this game and I kind of forget about them sometimes. Most likely to increase game length because Sonic's story can be beaten in a little over an hour if you know what you're doing, they have 5 smaller extra campaigns you need to complete before you unlock the final Super Sonic campaign to wrap up the story. First you have Tails, who plays pretty similar to Sonic. The main difference is instead of being able to do the homing attack, Tails is able to fly instead. As well as instead of doing a spin dash, he does kind of a special somersault. Tails' levels are races against Sonic where you play a portion of the level and, well, race Sonic. I actually really like these, not for the challenge because it's incredibly easy to beat the Sonic NPC, but Tails' different gameplay lends itself really well to fun shortcuts that Sonic's gameplay doesn't. Like, you can fly through a whole portion that Sonic would normally have to run through, that's pretty cool, but my main issue with Tails' story is that his levels are so short. They only go through a short portion of the main level seen in Sonic's story and make some changes for Tails' different gameplay, but overall you can beat these in less than a minute usually. As well as Tails only going through about half the levels that Sonic normally goes through. Like, come on, they could have at least done us a bone and let us play through Red Mountain at least. That's like the best level in the game. As an extra challenge, Tails is able to race Eggman, who's a hard mode version of Sonic, which I actually found myself enjoying these stages a lot more because Eggman can actually be a challenge unlike Sonic. What I like most about Tails' story is that it actually gives Tails more characterization and even a full character arc, which we had never really seen for Tails up to this point. Like in the original Genesis games, all Tails really did was follow Sonic, and in cartoons like Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Tails is portrayed like an impressionable young child that Sonic mentors. Remember when he smoked that one time? That was pretty cool. But in his story in Sonic Adventure, it shows Tails attempting to prove himself and stand on his own when he's separated from Sonic, and I just really like this. It makes Tails feel like he's maturing as a character, even though his voice sounds like,
"Yeah, it's just that I'm testing a new prototype power supply."
Like this. Of course, it's not done super elegantly. Most of the dialogue in this game is, well, something for sure. But it shows that these are actual characters that have feelings and stuff, which was not really seen in games around this time. The next campaign is Knuckles' campaign, which departs heavily from the gameplay seen before. At the beginning of the story, the Master Emerald is shattered, so he has to go and locate each shard of the Master Emerald, because he's able to locate them through, like, magic or something. I don't remember. So his levels mainly revolve following hints in your radar to find the 3 pieces of the Master Emerald hidden around each stage. I won't lie, I don't really like these levels. I find the change in gameplay to be kind of boring and can really drag on, especially if you suck at the gameplay like me. These levels also have a little bit of combat in them, which I do like, and I kind of wish that instead of doing the whole searching thing, you instead had to fight through hordes of Eggman's robots to collect pieces of the Master Emerald instead, kind of like the Werehog stages in Sonic Unleashed. But what we got here is fine, and I guess if you take the time to actually get good at the gameplay, I'm sure you can get done with these stages pretty quickly. I personally do not care for this gameplay, so it usually takes me like 10 minutes. What I like most here is that the levels Knuckles goes through shows us different areas we only see glimpses of in Sonic's story. Like in Speed Highway, we get to see this more open daylight area we only see for a second towards the end of Sonic's playthrough, but here we can fully explore it, which I really like. Or in Casinopolis, you're in the main area of the casino rather than just one floor, so you can see that this is for some reason like the coolest place ever. Like they have a whole pirate ship area. What is this, a casino or a theme park made for kids? Start 'em young is what I say. The next campaign here is Amy's campaign, and this is actually really the first time we're introduced to Amy as a character in the Sonic series. Her first appearance was in Sonic CD, but she only has a few seconds of screen time and isn't even called by her name, even in the manual. Instead, she's called Princess Sally, like from Sonic Sat AM. By the way, this is only if you're a degenerate American like me, but still. Amy in this game has by far the most changes in her character design from the rest. While the rest got slight tweaks like giving them an eye color or whatever, but for Amy, she's given a whole new hairstyle, dress, and just look overall. Amy's gameplay is similar to Sonic and Tails' gameplay, but instead of being speed-focused, it's more exploration-focused. Amy is incredibly slow in comparison to Sonic, and her gameplay more or less relies on doing something like pressing a few buttons to open up a door or killing some enemies or whatever. Her main gameplay gimmick is her Pico Pico hammer, which is this hammer about twice her size that comes out of an undisclosed location of her body, which is used as a melee weapon to hit enemies and stuff. Now, I don't mean to be cold when I say this, but Amy's story in Sonic Adventure kinda makes me wish I was fucking dead. She is so damn slow and finicky to control, and the camera is constantly changing its orientation, so you need to keep switching the control stick, and it just becomes a pain in the ass. I think there are fun parts in Amy's story, and once adjusted to the change in feel, you can probably find a lot of fun with this gameplay. Me, I would rather switch a Sonic story. It takes like 3 button presses, but hey, you do you. My favorite part here is giving Amy more of a character, by the way, if you didn't catch that from the start of this segment. The next campaign in this game is actually a brand new character never seen in the Sonic series, a fat f***ing purple cat that likes fishing. Big Story is by far the most divisive part of this game. It's always been panned for introducing a completely different form of gameplay that's generally clunky to control and requiring it to beat the game fully, and I have to agree. Big's gameplay is, well, it's just fishing. Basically, Big's pet frog, Froggy, has run away and you need to keep catching him in pools of water throughout different levels of the game, always losing Froggy because of some contrived reason. Now, I actually really like Big's story in the context of the rest of the game. While every story connects together pretty well, and they all revolve around trying to stop Eggman and Chaos, but Big, the dude just wants to fish and gets caught up in all the action. Big is just a funny character. I mean, look at him, he's a big-ass cat with fishing gear. Like, look at his size in comparison to Sonic. The fucker's huge. Now, if I said this about 5 years ago, I would have most likely been torn to shreds, but I actually find Big's gameplay pretty fun. While the required bits of just catching Froggy, you can beat each level really quickly if you know what you're doing, but if you do the extra challenges like catching a certain amount of weight, these can actually be pretty fun. Except for those challenges where you need to find one fish that weighs like 5,000 pounds. Don't play those. Just don't. The next and final, except not really, campaign in this game is another brand new character to the Sonic series, being E102 Gamma, who I'll just call Gamma because who named this poor guy? Oh yeah. Gamma is a part of a brand new series of badniks created by Eggman called the Gamma series, which are supposed to harness the power of chaos or whatever. After a while, Gamma ends up meeting Amy, who's able to help Gamma gain some sort of sentience and instead fight against Eggman for the greater good instead of doing bad stuff like whatever he was doing, like shooting people and stuff. No good, by the way, don't do that. Gamma ends up deciding to free all the flickies hidden inside of the robots created by Eggman, realizing that they're all just innocent animals being used for evil, and ends up sacrificing himself. This is of course an incredibly condensed version of Gamma's story shown in his campaign because it's not super relevant, but I love this story especially in the context of Sonic Adventure. Similar to Big's story, this campaign is relatively disconnected from the rest of the chaos, pun absolutely intended, only being connected in smaller ways in other stories. But that's why I like this. It gives this game a lot more world building in this game, and it's like the world does not completely revolve around Sonic. Appreciate this while you can. Gamma's gameplay fits in pretty well with characters like Sonic, Tails, and Amy, except Gamma is given a lot of Shadow the Hedgehog 2005, a gun. A lot of Big's gameplay relies on shooting everything around to progress. Why did I write Big? Big doesn't have a gun. A lot of Gamma's gameplay relies on shooting everything around you to progress, which I know I complained a lot about that in Amy's story and how it just kind of stops and goes, but Gamma's handled a lot better. You don't have to slowly walk around most of the time like Amy, instead you can just shoot things with a gun, and it's incredibly satisfying once you start pulling off combos and whatnot. Now, like pretty much every character here, Gamma's gameplay in no way gets close to the amount of fun in Sonic's story, but I do like his gameplay for what it is. Filler. That's a little negative, but do you see my point? But once completing all 6 of these campaigns in the game, you unlock the final story. Unneeded. Eggman is able to retrieve all 7 Chaos Emeralds through all 6 stories, only being slightly convoluted to keep up with, and feeds them to Chaos, who once given turns into Perfect Chaos, this gigantic water beast. Perfect Chaos pretty much destroys the entirety of Station Square, flooding it by like a dozen feet. Jesus Christ, the casualties here must have been in the tens of thousands. So Sonic must harness the power of the Chaos Emeralds and turn into Super Sonic and destroy Chaos and save the world. Only like tens of thousands of people needed to die. Look at the wreckage. This is such a big climactic ending for this game, and it really shows how cool this game is after you may have forgotten it after playing through, say, Big's story. The rock music by Crush 40 and the stake of everything here is just so awesome, and it just feels cool. Do I even need to explain to you? Just look how raw this is. And after 6 campaigns and a quick ending story concluding everything, that is the end of Sonic Adventure. Although there is an extra reward for completing literally everything in this game, being a Metal Sonic story who is just a model swap of Sonic's story. Could have been cool. Sonic Adventure is, in my opinion, an excellent transition from 2D to 3D, and while I've spent a lot of time praising this game, it most definitely is not perfect at all. I would say the only really great story here is Sonic's story, and the rest range from okay to outright bad. I think this game's main issue is that instead of focusing on a few characters in one story, the game focuses on 6 characters each connecting into one big story, which in concept is an awesome idea, but in execution, it can just make the game feel incredibly bloated, and like you're playing 6 completely different games. because you almost are. Like, switching from Sonic's high-speed and thrilling gameplay to Big's fishing is so jarring. Like, what was the thought process here? I'm not saying at all that they should have only included Sonic in this game, because that would have taken away a lot of the charm that the Sonic series has, but I wish instead of focusing on 6 not super in-depth gameplay styles, they instead brought it down to maybe 3, because it would just feel more cohesive and more in-depth. Plus, having to go through 6 completely different campaigns just to learn how the game ends is so weird, like what the hell. There is actually another kind of gameplay style here I have neglected to mention, being the Chow Garden, which is a pet simulator. You can raise these alien creatures called chows and make them do certain things, like make them have different attributes and whatever. The Chow Garden is actually super in-depth, and you can waste hundreds, if not thousands of hours here just trying to raise the perfect chow. Look it up on YouTube, people have done it. I like the idea of the Chow Garden, I can see why so many people find this appealing, but I've never really spent the time to get truly engrossed with this, so it's kind of just an area I accidentally enter and get like a loading screen. That's about it to me. I did own a Tamagotchi named Poop Face when I was little though. I lost it. It's really tragic. This again kind of falls into my complaint with the 6 different campaigns and how this game just has so much bloat. Like, no offense to all you Chow Garden fans out there, trust me, I have more respect for you than I do myself, but I kind of wish that instead of making a super in-depth pet simulator in a Sonic game, they instead, I don't know, made the main game better. But don't get me wrong, all this extra stuff really adds to the charm and the reason why I and so many other people love Sonic Adventure so much. Like, if the game was just Sonic, then it wouldn't be as memorable, but look at, it's Big the Cat! Big the f***ing cat! Except the Dreamcast failed miserably, leading to Sega not being able to follow up on a lot of the plans they had for the future, but that's a story for another day. This game to me feels like I'm drinking an inappropriate amount of those Monster energy drinks, because like, look at this game's energy. Which is why to replicate the dopamine hit I get from playing this game, I'm going to be mixing one of those Monster energy drinks into my breakfast. Yum. Oh, ew.